"Daddy, can I share my food with that poor little girl? What this billionaire dad does next shocks everyone in the restaurant." The hunger was so painful that Molly could barely stand. Her small, bare feet were cold against the chilly concrete of the sidewalk. She pressed her face against the restaurant window, leaving a foggy mark on the clean glass. Inside, there was so much luxury that her light blue eyes could hardly process it all. Tables covered with white tablecloths, shiny silverware, steaming plates. And the smell. The smell of food made her stomach ache even more. At a table near the window, a blonde girl her age was eating slowly, talking with a well-dressed man in a suit. Molly watched every forkful as every movement. She swallowed hard. When was the last time she had eaten something warm? She couldn't remember. The little girl inside the restaurant had golden hair that shone under the light of the chandeliers. Her blue eyes were similar to Molly's, but there was something different in them: joy, safety, things Molly had lost a long time ago. "Daddy, there's a girl looking at us," Ava said, pointing discreetly toward the window. Daniel Stevens looked up from his phone, annoyed by the interruption. Saturdays were his only free days with Ava, but even so, work never stopped. He owned one of the largest construction companies in the city. Money wasn't the problem, time was. "Diet your lasagna, Ava," he replied automatically, going back to typing on his phone. But Ava couldn't stop looking. There was something about the girl at the window that made her uneasy. When their eyes met through the glass, Ava saw something she couldn't name. Sadness, hunger, loneliness. Molly hesitated, then gave a timid wave. Ava waved back with a wide smile. "So she's hungry, Daddy." Daniel mumbled, without taking his eyes off the screen. The restaurant was full on that sunny Saturday. Wealthy families were having lunch, laughing, celebrating. Waiters hurried from table to table, the noise of conversations mixed with the clinking of silverware against fine china. Ava continued to watch the girl. She was too thin. Her clothes, which must have once been white, were now grey with dirt. But it was her bare feet that caught Ava's attention the most. How could someone walk on the street without shoes? "Daddy, can I share my food with that poor little girl?" The question made Daniel lift his head completely. He looked where Ava was pointing and saw the child pressed against the window. Other customers in the restaurant began to notice and whisper among themselves. Some frowned and clearly annoyed. "Ava, sweetie, she can't come in here," Daniel said, turning back to his phone. "This is a restaurant." "But she's hungry," Ava insisted, with her characteristic stubbornness. "Look how she's staring at the food." Daniel sighed. It was his day off. He didn't want complications, arguments, or awkward situations. He just wanted to have a peaceful lunch with his daughter and go home. "Mommy always said sharing is good," Ava continued. Maria's words echoed in Daniel's mind. His wife had died 2 years ago in a car accident. Since then, he and Ava had been trying to find a new routine, a new way of living. On Saturdays, they always went out for lunch. It was their tradition. "Please, Daddy, just this once." There was something in Ava's voice that Daniel recognized. It was the same determination Maria had when she wanted to help someone, the same blue eyes full of compassion. Daniel looked again at the girl in the window. She was still there, motionless, like a small, fragile statue. Her blue eyes never left Ava's plate. "Please," Ava repeated. Daniel put his phone in his pocket and waved for the waiter. The man approached quickly. "That little girl outside." Daniel hesitated. "My daughter would like to invite her to have lunch with us." The waiter looked at the window, then at the manager behind the counter. Several customers were watching the situation with curiosity. The manager didn't look very happy, but he nodded reluctantly. "Of course, Mr. Stevens. I'll go get her." The waiter went out a side door and returned a few minutes later with the little girl. Up close, she seemed even smaller and more vulnerable. Her blonde hair was messy and dirty. Her clothes were torn in places. But it was the smell that Daniel noticed first, a mix of dirt and fear. Molly stopped at the restaurant entrance, her wide eyes scanning the luxurious environment. She had never been in a place like this. The well-dressed people, the sparkling chandeliers, the delicious smell of food. It all felt like a dream. "Everyone is looking at me," she whispered to the waiter, taking a step back. indeed. Several people were watching with curiosity, and some with clear disapproval. An elderly lady muttered something to her husband, shaking her head negatively. "You can sit with us," Ava said quickly, getting up from her chair and waving. "I'll order food for you." Daniel noticed the murmurs around them. He decided to take action. "Come," he said, standing up and pulling out a chair. His voice was firm and loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "You are our guest." The stairs shifted away. Molly approached slowly, like a frightened animal. She sat on the edge of the chair, ready to flee at any moment. "And what's your name?" Ava asked, excited. She whispered, without lifting her eyes from the floor. "I'm Ava, and this is my daddy, Daniel." Molly gave a timid nod. Daniel waved for the waiter. "Could you bring another plate of lasagna, please, and an orange juice?" "For me?" Molly asked, finally looking up. Her eyes were the same light blue as Ava's, but there was a sadness in them that made Daniel's heart ache. "For you," Daniel confirmed. When the food arrived, Molly looked at the plate as if it were made of gold. She picked up the fork with reverence and tasted a small piece. Her eyes widened with pleasure. Then she began to eat. Too fast, swallowing large pieces without chewing properly, as if someone might take her plate away at any moment. Her hands instinctively protected the food. "Wow, you're really hungry," Ava observed, impressed. "You can take your time," Daniel said softly. "No one is going to take your food. If you want more, I'll order it." Molly stopped eating and looked at him, suspicion mixed with hope. "Really? Really?" She went back to eating, but a little more slowly. Daniel watched in silence, trying to guess when the girl's last decent meal had been. From the looks of it, it had been days. "Do you live around here?" Ava asked, always curious. Molly stopped chewing and looked down at her plate. "I don't live anywhere." "What do you mean?" "Ava," Daniel interrupted gently. "Let her eat in peace." But Ava remained fascinated by her new acquaintance. "Want to see my drawing?" she asked, picking up a napkin scribbled with colored pencils. "It's our house." Molly looked at the drawing with genuine interest. 2 stick figures in front of a square with a triangle for a roof. "It's pretty," she said quietly. "We have a big yard and a pool," Ava continued. "And my room is pink with unicorns." Molly smiled for the first time since she had entered, a timid but real smile. "How about some dessert?" Daniel asked. "They have ice cream here." Molly's eyes lit up. "Ice cream? 2 chocolate ice creams," Ava ordered excitedly. When the ice cream arrived, the 2 girls ate together, talking quietly. Ava talked about her school, her favorite cartoons, her dolls. Molly just listened, asking occasional questions. Daniel watched the scene with a strange feeling in his chest. It had been a long time since he'd seen Ava so lively and talkative. Since Maria's death, the girl had become quieter, more reserved. But there, talking with Molly, she was back to being the cheerful child she used to be. "Do you have dolls?" Ava asked. Molly shook her head no, with no apparent sadness. It was as if she had never expected to have toys anyway. "I have lots. When you come over to my house, you can play with them." Daniel felt a pang. Ava was making plans, creating expectations. But what were the chances they would see Molly again? After almost 2 hours, Daniel looked at his watch. The restaurant was starting to empty. "We have to go, Ava." "Already?" Ava pouted. "But I was talking to Molly. It's getting late." Ava turned to Molly with genuine sadness. "It was really nice meeting you." "Me too," Molly said, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you so much for the food." The 2 girls stood up. For a moment, they faced each other, unsure how to say goodbye. "Bye, Molly," Ava said, giving her a spontaneous hug. Molly returned the hug, holding Ava tightly, as if she wanted to hold on to that moment forever. "Bye, Ava." Molly turned to Daniel, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you, sir. It was the best lunch of my life." The simple sentence hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. The best lunch of my life. A common meal for him had been the highlight of a child's life. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Molly." She smiled one last time, waved to them both, and headed for the door. Before leaving, She glanced over her shoulder one last time, as if wanting to memorize this place, these people who had been kind to her, and then she was gone, disappearing into the street crowd as if she had never existed. Ava stayed pressed against the window for several minutes, searching for Molly on the busy sidewalk. "Will we see her again, Daddy?" Daniel didn't know what to answer. Street kids appeared and disappeared every day in the city. The chances were slim. "I don't know, sweetie." "She seemed so lonely," Ava said, still looking out at the street. In the car, on the way home, Ava was quiet for a while. Daniel thought she had forgotten about the encounter, but then she spoke. "Daddy, does she have a home?" "I don't know, Ava. Does she have anyone?" Daniel hesitated. "How do you explain abandonment and loneliness to a 5-year-old? "I don't know that either. She seemed so lonely." Ava paused, thoughtful. "Just like I was when Mommy went away." His daughter's words struck Daniel like a lightning bolt. Ava had never verbalized her feelings about her mother's death so directly, and now she was comparing her own loneliness to that of a street girl. "You felt lonely when Mommy died?" he asked softly. "Sometimes, especially at night." "Even with you, Daddy, I felt lonely." Daniel felt something stir in his chest, a mixture of guilt, sadness, and something else he couldn't identify. He had focused so much on working, on maintaining financial stability, that perhaps he hadn't noticed his own daughter's loneliness. "And Molly doesn't even have a daddy or a mommy," Ava continued. "Thought it must be so much worse." "It must be. She said it was the best lunch of her life, Daddy." "She did." "That's so sad, isn't it?" Daniel looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. Her blue eyes were filled with a comprehension that seemed far too mature for a 5-year-old. "Yes, it's very sad. I wish she had a family like us." Daniel felt something powerful move within him. He didn't know what it was exactly, but it was strong. It was as if something had awakened during that lunch, something that had been dormant since Maria's death. "Maybe she does, sweetie. We don't know her whole story. But if she doesn't..." Ava paused. "We could help, right, Daddy?" "How?" "I don't know, but we could." Daniel didn't answer, but Ava's words echoed in his mind the entire way home. When they arrived, Ava ran to her room to play. Daniel stood in the living room, looking out the window. The house was too quiet, it always was on weekends. It was a large mansion, with manicured gardens, a pool, everything money could buy. But it was empty. It lacked life, laughter, human warmth. Since Maria's death, Daniel had closed himself off. He worked too much, went out little, lived only for Ava and his business. He had built a safe and predictable routine, without surprises or strong emotions. But that lunch had cracked something in that routine. The image of Molly pressed against the window, her hungry eyes, her timid smile when she ate the ice cream, and especially her last words, "It was the best lunch of my life." Daniel found himself wondering where Molly would be sleeping that night, if she was cold, if she was scared, if there was anyone in the world who cared about her. And he wondered what kind of man he had become, that he could dine in a luxurious house while a child his daughter's age slept on the street. Something strong was moving inside him. He didn't know what it was, but it was impossible to ignore. It was as if a seed had been planted during that lunch. A seed that was beginning to sprout, even though he didn't yet know what kind of tree would grow from it. In her room, Ava was playing with her dolls, but her words reached the living room. "Your name is Molly, okay? And you don't have a home, so you can live here with me." Daniel closed his eyes and felt that something fundamental had changed. The lunch really had changed everything. He just didn't know how yet. Daniel woke up on Sunday thinking about Molly. He had dreamed of those tired blue eyes all night. In the kitchen, as he made breakfast, he couldn't get the phrase she had said out of his head. "It was the best lunch of my life." Ava came downstairs, still in her pajamas, her blonde hair disheveled. "Good morning, Daddy." "Good morning, sweetie. Want some pancakes?" "Yes, Daddy. Do you think Molly slept well last night?" The question caught Daniel off guard. He stopped stirring the batter and looked at his daughter. "Why are you thinking about that?" "I thought about it all night. Where did she sleep? Was she cold? Did anyone take care of her?" Daniel served the pancakes, but Ava barely touched her food. "She said she doesn't live anywhere, remember?" "I remember." "So where does she sleep?" Daniel sighed. How could he explain to a 5-year-old that there were children sleeping on the streets? In different places, Ava. What kind of places? I don't know exactly. Ava was quiet for a moment, pushing the pancake around her plate. Daddy, can we go look for her? Look where, sweetie? At the restaurant. Maybe she'll go back there. Daniel hesitated. Part of him also wanted to know if Molly was okay, but another part feared getting more involved than he already was. Please, Daddy, just to see if she's okay. Ava's blue eyes were full of genuine concern. It was the same expression Maria used to make when she was worried about someone. All right, we'll go take a look around there. Ava's face lit up. Really? Really? But just to see if she's okay, all right? Okay. An hour later, they were in the car on their way downtown. Ava looked out the window anxiously, searching for a little blonde girl on every corner. There, she suddenly shouted. Is that her? Daniel looked where Ava was pointing. It was a child, but she had dark hair and was older. That's not her, sweetie. And there, Ava pointed in another direction. Not her either. When they reached the restaurant, Daniel parked across the street and they watched. It was Sunday morning, so the establishment was closed. The street was quieter than the day before. She's not here, Ava said, disappointed. Let's walk around the area, Daniel suggested. They got out of the car and started walking. The downtown area was different on weekends. Less traffic, more homeless people visible in corners and parks. Daddy, look at those people, Ava said, pointing to a group of adults sitting under an awning. I see them. Are they homeless too? It looks like it. Why are some people homeless? Daniel didn't know how to answer. How do you explain social inequality, poverty, and neglect to a child? It's complicated, Ava. Sometimes things get hard for some people. They walked for 2 more blocks without finding Molly. Daniel began to think they wouldn't find her. The city was big, and a child alone could be anywhere. Let's look there. Ava pointed to a side alley. No, Ava, let's go back to the car. But what if she's in there? Alleys aren't safe places. Please, just a quick peek. Daniel hesitated. The alley didn't seem dangerous. It was broad daylight, and Ava would only be at ease if they were sure. All right. But you stay right by my side. They entered the alley slowly. There were some dumpsters and cardboard boxes scattered around. The smell was not pleasant. Daniel was about to suggest they turn back when he heard a noise. Someone was rummaging through one of the dumpsters. Daddy, someone's there, Ava whispered. Daniel saw a small figure leaning over the trash, looking for something. Messy blonde hair, the same dirty clothes from the day before. Molly, Ava called out. The girl turned around, startled, ready to run. When she saw Daniel and Ava, she stopped, but remained tense. Hi, Molly, Ava said, running towards her. Ava, slow down, Daniel cautioned. Molly looked at them with suspicion. Her hands were dirty with trash and she smelled bad. She had found a piece of stale bread that she held like a treasure. What are you guys doing here? She asked. We came looking for you, Ava replied excitedly. I was worried about you. Worried about me? Yes. I wanted to know if you slept well, if you weren't cold. Molly looked at Ava as if she were from another planet. No one had ever worried about her before. Daniel approached slowly and knelt down to Molly's level. Up close, he could see she was even dirtier than the day before. Her eyes were tired, as if she hadn't slept well. Did you spend the night here? He asked gently. Molly shook her head. No. Where did you sleep? In the park, under a bench. Daniel felt his heart tighten. A 5-year-old child had slept outdoors, alone, in a city park. Were you cold? A little, but I covered myself with a newspaper. Molly, Daniel said, his voice soft but firm. Did you want to come with us today? Molly took a step back, suspicious. Where to? To our house, Ava answered quickly. You can take a bath, eat warm food, and play with my dolls. Why would you do that? The question was simple, but loaded with mistrust. Molly had learned early on that when adults offered things, they usually wanted something in return. Because you need help, Daniel answered honestly. And because my daughter worried about you all night. I really did worry, Ava confirmed. I kept thinking about whether you were okay, if you were scared. Molly looked from Daniel to Ava, processing the information. Someone had worried about her. Someone had come looking for her. Art, you're not going to do anything bad to me. Of course not, Ava said. We just want to help. Daniel held out his hand to Molly. You can trust us. We just want you to be safe and well fed today. Molly looked at the outstretched hand. Then she looked at the piece of stale bread she was holding. Then she looked into Daniel's eyes. There was something in them she recognized. Genuine kindness. Okay, she said quietly. Ava shouted with joy. Yay, you're going to love our house. In the car, Molly sat in the back seat next to Ava, but pressed against the door, still ready to flee if necessary. Ava chattered non-stop, pointing out the neighborhood through the window, talking about school, about her friends. Our house is big. It has a blue pool and a garden with flowers, and my room has a bed that looks like a princess's. Molly listened to everything in silent awe. She had never been in a big house. When they arrived at the residential neighborhood, her eyes widened. The houses were huge, with perfect lawns and luxury cars in the driveways. That's it. Ava pointed to a white mansion with manicured gardens. When they entered the house, Molly stood in the foyer dumbfounded. The place was bigger than any place she had ever lived. There were curved staircases, sparkling chandeliers, paintings on the walls. Molly, are you okay? Ava asked. It's so big, Molly whispered. Want to see my room? First, she needs a bath, Daniel interrupted gently. And then we can find some clean clothes for her. Ava took Molly to the upstairs bathroom. It was larger than any room Molly had ever slept in. The bathtub was white and shiny, with golden faucets. Do you know how to take a bath by yourself? Ava asked. I do, Molly replied, still impressed by the luxury around her. I'll ask Daddy to bring clean towels and shampoo. Take a long time, okay? To get all the dirt off. While Molly bathed, Daniel looked for clothes that might fit her. Ava had some smaller items that might work. He also prepared a snack, sandwiches, fruit, milk. 40 minutes later, Molly came down the stairs unrecognizable. Her blonde hair shone clean. Her rosy skin smelled fresh. She was wearing one of Ava's pink t-shirts, which was a little big but fit well enough. Wow, you look beautiful, Ava exclaimed. I like a princess, Molly smiled shyly. It had been so long since she had felt clean that she had forgotten how good it felt. You must be hungry, Daniel said. I made a snack. In the kitchen, Molly ate slowly, savoring every bite. This time, she didn't eat with the desperation she had at the restaurant. Daniel had said she could eat as much as she wanted, so she allowed herself to relax. Molly, Ava said, sitting next to her. Where did you live before? Molly stopped chewing and looked at her sandwich. With my grandma. And where is she now? She passed away. The words hung heavy in the air. Ava was quiet for a moment. What and your parents? My mom died when I was a baby. I never knew my dad. Daniel, who was washing dishes at the sink, stopped to listen. Molly's story was slowly unfolding. So you lived alone with your grandma? Yeah. We had a little house, but it was ours. She took care of me, told me stories, made food. Molly's voice became nostalgic. Was it a good little house? Ava asked. It was. It wasn't big or pretty like this one, but it was ours. I had my own bed and some stuffed animals my grandma made for me. And what happened? My grandma got sick, very sick. She had to go to the hospital. I stayed at home alone, waiting for her to come back, but she never did. Daniel turned to look at Molly. She told the story with a frightening matter-of-factness, as if it were normal for a 5-year-old to go through that. And after my grandma died, I was alone in the house. I didn't know what to do. There was no food, no money. I didn't know anyone. Then what? Ava asked, absorbed in the story. Some people came to the house. They said I couldn't stay there alone, that the house wasn't mine anymore, that I had to leave. But where were you supposed to go? I didn't know. So I started walking. I left the house and started walking through the city. I slept under a bridge the first night. I was so scared. Daniel closed his eyes, imagining a small child alone under a bridge. Then I found some cardboard boxes behind a store. I made a kind of little house with them. I slept there when it wasn't raining. And when it rained, I got wet, or I tried to find some covered place. Once I slept inside an old abandoned bus. And food. How did you get food? Sometimes I found it in trash cans, pieces of bread, fruit that wasn't too spoiled. One time a lady gave me a cookie. Weren't you scared? I was very scared, especially at night. I would close my eyes and pretend I was in my little bed, with my grandma telling me a story. Molly stopped talking and took a sip of milk. One night it was very cold. Really, really cold. I was in a box, but the wind blew through everything. I thought I was going to freeze to death. Wow, Ava whispered. I shivered all night, crying. I thought, I'm going to die here alone, just like my grandma. But when the sun came up, I was still alive. And then I thought, if I survive this night, I can survive others. Daniel came over and sat at the table, his heart heavy with every word from Molly. How long have you been living like this? I don't know for sure. A few months. I lost track of the days. And yesterday, when we found you at the restaurant, I was so hungry. It had been 2 days since I'd found anything but a few crumbs. I saw you guys eating and I thought how good it would be to have warm food again. And now, Ava asked. Are you better? Molly smiled for the first time during the whole conversation. Much better, thank you for helping me. Daniel looked at Molly, clean, fed, safe in his house, and felt something profound stir in his chest. This child didn't need luxury. She didn't need mansions or expensive cars. She needed something much simpler and much more important. She needed people. People who cared if she was cold, hungry, scared. She needed someone to tell her stories before bed, to worry when she didn't show up, to be happy when she smiled. She needed a family. Molly, he said softly, would you like to stay here tonight? To sleep in a real bed, have breakfast tomorrow? Molly looked at him with hope mixed with suspicion. Guys, can I really? You sure can, Ava answered before Daniel could. You can sleep in my room, I have an extra bed. Are you sure? Molly asked Daniel. I'm sure. And in that moment, Daniel knew something had changed forever. This wasn't just a night of charity. It was the beginning of something bigger, something he couldn't yet name, but that he felt growing in his chest. The girl didn't need luxury. She needed people. And maybe, just maybe, they needed her too. On Molly's first morning in the house, Daniel woke up to a sound he hadn't heard in a long time. Children's laughter. Not just one, but two voices mingling in pure, joyful giggles. He went downstairs and found Ava and Molly in the living room, sitting on the floor, surrounded by dolls, building blocks, and colored pencils scattered everywhere. It was a colorful, noisy chaos, exactly the opposite of the organized silence that had dominated the house for the past 2 years. Good morning, girls, Daniel said, stopping at the living room door. Good morning, Daddy, Ava shouted without looking up from the toys. Molly has never played with real dolls before. Is that true? Daniel asked, approaching. Molly nodded, a little embarrassed, but her eyes were shining. Dad, my grandma used to make rag dolls for me, but I never had dolls like these, she said, holding a blonde doll in a blue dress. She's very pretty. You can have her, Ava said generously. I have lots. Really? Really? You're my friend now, so you can have any toys you want. Daniel watched the interaction with a smile. Ava had found a companion, and Molly had found someone who treated her as an equal. It was magical to see. How about some breakfast? He suggested. The two of them ran to the kitchen, still chatting excitedly. During breakfast, Daniel noticed how much Molly had changed in just one night. Her blonde hair shone clean, her rosy skin looked healthy, and most importantly, there was a light in her blue eyes. Molly, do you like pancakes? Ava asked. I've never had them, Molly admitted. Never. Ava's eyes widened. Daddy, make pancakes for Molly. Of course, Daniel smiled, with chocolate syrup. What's chocolate syrup? Molly asked. Ava nearly fell off her chair. You've never had chocolate syrup. Wow, you've missed out on so much good stuff in life. When Daniel served the pancakes with syrup, Molly tasted them slowly, carefully. Her eyes widened with pleasure. "This is so yummy," she said, smiling. "I told you." Ava clapped her hands. "And now you can have pancakes every Sunday, just like me." Ava's casual phrase created a moment of silence. Every Sunday implied a future permanence. Molly looked at Daniel with a silent question in her eyes. "Eat slowly," Daniel said gently, not directly answering the implicit question. "We have all day." After breakfast, the girls went back to the living room. Daniel tried to work in his office, but the sound of laughter and conversation constantly distracted him. Not in an annoying way. On the contrary, it was as if the house had awakened from a deep sleep. "Let's play family," he heard Ava say. "How do you play that?" "It's easy. You're the older daughter, I'm the younger one, and my big doll is the mommy." "And the daddy?" "Daddy's at work," Ava replied automatically. That's how it was in real life, so that's how it was in the game. Daniel felt a pang of guilt. How many times had Ava played alone while he worked? How many conversations had he missed because he was focused on business? "So, Molly, in our family, you have your own room," Ava continued, "with a princess bed and everything." "Really? Really? And you go to school with me, and we play together every day?" Daniel stopped typing. Ava was building a future for Molly, without even realizing it. In her mind, Molly was already part of the family. "And we'll never be lonely," Ava added quietly. "Because now there are two of us." The sentence hit Daniel like a punch. Ava had felt lonely all these years, even with him around. She needed a companion, someone her own age to share secrets, games, and dreams with. He left his office and found the two girls creating an elaborate city of blocks in the middle of the living room. Ava was explaining where the school, the park, and the ice cream shop would be. Molly listened, fascinated, adding her own ideas. "This will be our house," Ava said, pointing to a set of blocks. "It's big enough for the whole family." "Can I make a garden?" Molly asked. "My grandma always dreamed of having a big garden." "Of course. Let's make the most beautiful garden in the world." Daniel sat in the armchair watching. The two worked together naturally, as if they had been sisters for years. Molly had lost her initial shyness and was now laughing openly, making suggestions, inventing stories for the little figures that inhabited the block city. "And here," Ava said, placing two small figures side by side, "are the two sisters who are never apart." "Sisters," Molly repeated the word carefully. "Yeah, do you want to be my sister?" Molly looked at Ava, her eyes shining. "I've always wanted a sister." "Well, now you have one." The two hugged spontaneously. Daniel felt his eyes well up. It was impossible not to be moved by the purity of that moment. In the afternoon, as the sun streamed through the large living room windows, the girls got out paper and colored pencils. They sat on the floor, on either side of a low table, and began to draw. "What are you going to draw?" Daniel asked. "It's a surprise," Ava said, covering her paper with her hands. "You can't look," Molly added, imitating Ava. They drew in concentrated silence for almost an hour. Occasionally, they would whisper to each other, planning details, choosing colors. Daniel pretended to read a book, but he was actually watching the two of them working together. Molly had quickly learned the codes of friendship with Ava. She shared the pencils without being asked, waited for her turn, and gave her opinion when asked. It was as if she had a natural instinct for getting along, developed from years of taking care of herself. "Done," Ava finally announced. "Can we show you?" Molly asked. "You can," Daniel said, coming closer. The two of them turned the paper towards him. It was a simple drawing, made with childish strokes, but it conveyed a powerful message. Two stick figures, one with yellow hair, Ava, and another with slightly shorter yellow hair, Molly, were holding hands in the center of the paper. Around them were colorful flowers, a smiling sun and fluffy clouds. At the bottom, in crooked but careful letters, was written, "Best friends forever." "It's beautiful," Daniel said, genuinely moved. "Molly wrote it," Ava said proudly. "She writes really well." "My grandma taught me," Molly explained. "She said knowing how to write was important." "Can I put it on the fridge?" Ava asked. "Of course," Daniel replied. The three of them went to the kitchen. Ava put the drawing on the refrigerator with a heart-shaped magnet. The two girls stood back, admiring their work, pleased with the result. "Now everyone who comes here will know we're best friends," Ava said. "Forever," Molly completed. Daniel looked at the drawing on the fridge. It was simple, childish, made with cheap-colored pencils, but it said everything. It spoke of friendship, of belonging, of hope. It spoke of two girls who had found in each other exactly what they needed. He felt his eyes fill with tears, not tears of sadness, but of a deep, inexplicable emotion. It was as if something inside him had been healed just by seeing that drawing. "Sir, Daddy, are you crying?" Ava asked, concerned. "No," Daniel lied, wiping his eyes. "It's just allergies." "Allergies don't make you cry," Molly said, watching him carefully. "Sometimes they do," Daniel improvised. The girls looked at each other, clearly not believing him, but they didn't press the issue. At the end of the afternoon, while the two played in the garden, Daniel watched from the kitchen window. Ava was showing Molly how the swing worked, how to jump rope, how to plant seeds in the flower bed. Molly absorbed everything with fascination. To her, that garden was an amusement park. The pool, even empty, was a wonder. The big house, with its spacious and comfortable rooms, was a palace. But what impressed Daniel the most was seeing how the two interacted. Ava had found someone who admired her, who laughed at her jokes, who wanted to do everything she did. Molly had found someone who accepted her completely, who shared everything willingly, who treated her as an equal. "Molly, do you know how to swim?" Ava asked, pointing to the pool. "No, I've never been in a pool." "I'll teach you in the summer," Ava promised. "It's really fun." Again, the promise of a future. Ava was already planning the summer with Molly, as if it were obvious she would be there. Daniel realized he had stopped asking himself, "What now?" Or, "What are we going to do with her?" Without even noticing, he had begun to accept Molly's presence as natural, as if she had always been part of the family. When it got dark, the girls came inside for dinner. Daniel had prepared pasta, nothing too elaborate, but enough. Molly ate slowly, savoring each forkful, still not quite used to the idea that there would always be enough food. "Molly, do you like stories?" Ava asked. "I do. My grandma used to tell me stories before bed." "What kind of stories?" "About princesses, talking animals, magical places." Molly's eyes lit up with the memory. "She would make up stories just for me." "Daddy tells stories too," Ava said. "Right, Daddy." Daniel stopped eating. It had been a long time since he had told Ava stories. Since Maria's death, he had lost the knack for such things. "Sometimes," he said vaguely. "You can tell a story for both of us tonight," Ava suggested excitedly. "Can you?" Molly asked hopefully. Daniel looked at the two pairs of blue eyes fixed on him, full of expectation. How could he say no? "Of course," he heard himself say. After dinner, the three of them went up to Ava's room. Daniel had set up an extra bed for Molly, but the two insisted on sleeping in the same bed, like real sisters. Daniel sat in the chair next to the bed and looked at the two girls under the covers, waiting for the story. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Then the words began to flow naturally. "Once upon a time, there were two princesses who lived in distant kingdoms," he began. "One had hair as golden as the sun, and the other also had golden hair, but it shone like the stars." The girls listened attentively, asking occasional questions, laughing at the funny parts. Daniel was surprised by his own ability to invent, to create a magical world where two princesses became best friends and had incredible adventures together. When he finished the story, Ava and Molly were almost asleep. "That was the best story I've ever heard," Molly whispered. "Will you tell another one tomorrow?" Ava asked. "Tomorrow," Daniel promised. He kissed both girls on the forehead and turned off the light. In the hallway, he stood for a moment, listening to the quiet voices coming from the room. "Ava," Molly whispered. "What is it?" "Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being my sister. Forever, forever." Daniel went downstairs, his heart heavy with emotion. The house was different. Not just because there was an extra child in it, but because new life was circulating through the rooms. For the last 2 years, since Maria's death, the house had become a silent mausoleum. He and Ava lived in it, but they didn't truly inhabit it. It was a place to sleep, eat, exist, but not to live. Now, with Molly there, everything had changed. There were toys scattered in the rooms, laughter echoing off the walls, lively conversations during meals. The house was breathing again. Daniel went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and his eyes fell on the drawing stuck to the fridge. Best friends forever. Two simple figures holding hands, surrounded by flowers and smiles. It was just a child's drawing. Colored pencil on paper, nothing sophisticated or artistically valuable. But for Daniel at that moment, it was the most beautiful thing he had seen in years. It said everything about hope, about new beginnings, about how love can arise in the most unexpected places. It told of two girls who had found in each other exactly what they needed to be happy. And maybe, just maybe, it told of a man who was learning to be a father again, to open his heart to the unexpected, to let life back into his home once more. Daniel smiled, his eyes full of water. It was simple, but it said everything. Upstairs, the two girls slept, wrapped in each other's arms, dreaming of princess adventures and magical gardens. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel Stevens' house didn't just shelter people. It sheltered a family that had been born in the most unlikely way possible, but that now felt as natural as breathing. The house was breathing, and so was Daniel. It was Monday morning, and Daniel should have been at his office 2 hours ago. His phone had rung 15 times, calls from his secretary, his partners, important clients, but he didn't answer. For the first time in years, work could wait. In the living room, Ava and Molly were sitting on the floor surrounded by colorful building blocks. They had started building what seemed to be a castle, but looked more like a haphazardly stacked mountain of pieces. "This isn't working," Ava complained, watching her tower collapse for the third time. "Maybe it needs a stronger base," Molly suggested, trying to help. Daniel watched from the armchair, torn between the desire to help and the habit of just observing. It had always been like that. He provided, bought toys, paid for nannies, but he rarely sat on the floor to actually play. "Daddy," Ava called him, frustrated with another fallen tower. "Do you know how to build a castle?" "I do," Daniel answered automatically. "Then come help." He hesitated. He was in a suit, ready to leave for work. The floor was covered with scattered blocks. It wasn't exactly the environment for a serious businessman. "Come on, Daddy," Ava insisted. "We can't do it by ourselves." Molly looked at him with expectation. Her blue eyes had that expression of someone who didn't want to ask for anything but was hoping for a lot. "Please." Ava made the face that always worked. Daniel glanced at his watch. Another missed meeting. Another contract that would have to be postponed. But when he looked at the two girls on the floor, surrounded by colorful blocks, something inside him gave in. "All right," he said, taking off his jacket and loosening his tie. "Yay!" Ava shouted. Daniel knelt on the floor, then sat down completely. The rug was soft and warmed by the sun coming through the window. When was the last time he had sat on the floor? "Now first, we need to make a solid base here," he said, starting to arrange the larger blocks, like this. "Wow, you really know how," Molly said, impressed. Daniel smiled. It had been a long time since someone had been impressed by something he did. At work, everything was expected, professional, serious. Here, building a block castle, he could be surprising. "Fine, now you can start putting up the walls," he instructed, one row at a time. The three sets of hands worked together, choosing colors, fitting pieces, discussing where each tower should go. Daniel found himself genuinely focused on the construction, completely forgetting about the problems at the office. "This can be the princess's room," Ava said, pointing to one of the towers. "And here's the garden," Molly added, creating a green space with blocks of that color. "It needs a bridge," Daniel observed, "to connect the two towers." "Good idea," they both said in unison. He began to build an elaborate bridge using engineering techniques he had learned in college decades ago. The girls watched, fascinated, as he created arches and supports with the simple blocks. "How do you know how to do that?" Molly asked. "I studied to build big things," Daniel explained. "Fire buildings or houses, real bridges. You build real houses? Molly's eyes widened. I do. That's so cool. You could build a house for me. Molly's words hung in the air. Daniel stopped building for a moment. A house for her, a place of her own, permanent, safe. Maybe one day, he said softly. They continued building in a comfortable silence. Daniel realized how relaxing this was. There was no pressure, no deadlines, no important decisions. Just three people creating something together with no other goal than to have fun. Done, Ava announced when they finished the main structure. Now it needs people living in it. She ran to get small figurines and began distributing them throughout the castle. Daniel watched as she created a whole story for each character, giving them names, personalities, relationships. This one is the king, she said, placing a figurine in the main tower. He's very nice and takes good care of the kingdom. And this is the queen, Molly added, choosing a blonde figurine. She helps the king make important decisions. Daniel noticed that Molly had chosen figures that seemed to form a traditional family. Father, mother, children, what she had always wished for. And these are the princesses, Ava continued, placing two smaller figurines. They are sisters and best friends. Real sisters? Molly asked. For real. One was born into the family, the other was adopted. But now they're sisters forever. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Ava was unconsciously creating the story she wanted to live. What do the princesses do? He asked, joining the game. They have adventures, Ava answered excitedly. So they save animals, help the people of the kingdom discover treasures. And they study hard to be smart, Molly added. And they're never lonely, because they always have each other, Ava completed. Daniel picked up the king figurine and spoke in a deep, solemn voice. My dear princesses, you are the most precious treasure in the kingdom. The girls laughed out loud. Do it again, Daddy, Ava begged. Do different voices. Daniel picked up the queen figurine and switched to a higher-pitched voice. Princesses, shall we have tea in the garden? Let's go, responded the princess figurines, with Daniel imitating children's voices. For almost an hour, the three of them created elaborate dialogues between the characters. Daniel surprised himself with his own creativity, inventing adventures, conflicts, and solutions. The girls laughed at his impressions and suggested new directions for the stories. During one of the adventures, Molly was moving her princess when her hand brushed against Daniel's. Instinctively, she pulled away, as she always did when she accidentally touched an adult. But Daniel didn't move his hand. He stayed there, quiet, letting her decide what to do. Molly looked at him, surprised. Then, slowly, she placed her small hand on top of his. Daniel gently closed his fingers around the small, warm hand. It was a simple, innocent touch, but loaded with meaning. It was trust. It was acceptance. It was the beginning of a bond he couldn't yet name. Your hands are big, Molly said quietly. And yours are small, Daniel replied, smiling. My grandma used to say that big hands are for protecting small hands. Your grandma was a wise woman. Ava watched the scene and, without a word, placed her hand on top of both of theirs. The three of them stayed like that for a moment, connected by a simple but profound touch. Now we're a real family, Ava said naturally. Daniel felt something stir in his chest. There, sitting on the living room floor, in a wrinkled suit and loose tie, holding the hands of two little girls. He wasn't the businessman Daniel Stevens. He wasn't the CEO of a construction company. He wasn't the widower who was afraid to get attached again. He was just a father, the father of a girl he'd always had, and the father of another who had arrived unexpectedly, but now felt as natural to have there as breathing. Should we keep playing? Molly asked. Let's, Daniel replied, not letting go of her hand. They continued creating adventures for the figurines, but now there was something different in the air. A new, stronger connection. Daniel allowed himself to be silly, to make funny voices, to invent absurd situations that made the girls roar with laughter. When the phone rang for the 20th time, Daniel looked at the screen and simply turned the device off. Sice, aren't you going to answer? Ava asked, surprised. Not today, Daniel said. Today I'm playing with my girls. Molly smiled upon hearing my girls. For the first time in her life, someone included her that way, as if she truly belonged somewhere. We can build a whole city, she suggested excitedly. Great idea, Daniel agreed. But first, how about a snack? Building cities makes you hungry. In the kitchen, Daniel made sandwiches for the three of them. Ava chatted about the next block construction projects, while Molly ate in silence, but with a constant smile on her face. "Daddy," Ava said suddenly, "you're different today." "Different how?" "More like a dad," Daniel laughed. "I've always been your dad, Ava." "I know, but today you're being a real dad, playing, making voices, holding our hand." Daniel looked at the two girls. Ava was right. He was being a real dad, not just a provider, protector, or guardian. He was being present, involved, connected. "Did you like the playful dad?" he asked. "We did," they both answered together. "Then you'll be seeing more of him," Daniel promised. And as they returned to the living room to continue building imaginary worlds with colorful blocks, Daniel knew that something fundamental had changed in him too. He had rediscovered not only how to be a father, but how to be happy being one. There, sitting on the floor, away from suits and meetings, he had found something he had lost long ago, the simple joy of being present in the lives of those he loved. He wasn't a businessman, he was a father, and for the first time in years, that was more than enough. It was almost bedtime when Molly remembered something important. She was sitting on Ava's bed, wearing borrowed pajamas that were a little too big, her hair still damp from her bath. "I forgot to show you something," she said quietly. "What is it?" Ava asked, curious. Molly got up and went to the small, tattered backpack that Daniel had brought from the makeshift shelter where they found her. It was practically all she owned in the world. She carefully rummaged through the few clothes and took out something small and rectangular. "It's a picture of my grandma," she said, returning to the bed. Daniel, who was arranging the blankets, came closer. Molly was holding an old photograph, slightly yellowed and with worn edges from being handled so much. In the image, a woman with grey hair smiled at the camera. She had kind eyes and a gentle face, marked by age but lit up by a warm expression. "She's pretty," Ava said. "She seems really nice." "She was the nicest person in the world," Molly replied, affectionately running her finger over the photo. "She took care of me, made me yummy food, told me stories." Daniel took the photo to get a better look, and his heart nearly stopped. That face was familiar, very familiar. "What was your grandmother's name?" he asked, his voice slightly altered. "Margaret?" Molly replied. "Margaret Wilson." Daniel sat down heavily in the chair next to the bed. Margaret Wilson. How had he not made the connection before? But of course, Molly had never mentioned her grandmother's full last name. "Daddy, are you okay?" Ava asked, noticing the strange expression on his face. Daniel looked at the photo again, then at Molly. The same blue eyes, the same shape of the face. How had he not noticed before? "Molly," he said softly. "Your grandmother. How did she work?" "She did. She cleaned offices at night. She would leave the house when I was already asleep and come back early in the morning to make me breakfast." "Where did she work?" "In a big building downtown. She always said it was an important building with important people." Daniel closed his eyes. Margaret Wilson. How had he been so blind all these years? "She worked with me," he said finally. "What?" Molly's eyes widened. "Your grandmother worked at my company for many years. She was in charge of cleaning the building." Molly looked at him in disbelief. "You knew my grandma?" "I did," Daniel confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "She was an honorable woman. The most honorable I have ever known." The memory came back in full force. Margaret Wilson, always punctual, always smiling, always respectful. She arrived every day at 9 at night and worked until 5 in the morning, cleaning every corner of the building to perfection. Daniel remembered how she always greeted everyone politely, how she never complained about extra hours, how she treated her work with dignity, even if it was just cleaning to others. "She always talked about a little granddaughter," Daniel continued, the memories crystallizing. "She said she was the light of her life. She talked about me." "She did, with great pride. She told me how smart you were, how you loved to learn, how pretty and polite you were." Molly smiled and her eyes shining. "She liked you a lot too," she said. "She always talked about how the people in the office were elegant and important." Daniel felt a pang of guilt. Elegant and important. To Margaret, they were superior, distant, unattainable people. She saw them from below, always from below. One time, Molly continued, she came home very happy because an important man had said thank you to her. She told that story for weeks. Daniel's heart ached. A simple thank you had been a source of joy for Margaret for weeks. How had he been so negligent with the people who worked for him? "Do you remember that man?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "I do." She said he was the owner of everything, but that he was polite, unlike the other bosses. Daniel remembered the day. He had stayed late at the office, working on an important proposal. Margaret was cleaning the next room when he left. She had held the door for him, smiling shyly. He had said, "Thank you, Margaret," without a second thought. For him, it had been an automatic, insignificant gesture. For her, it had been recognition, humanity, proof that he knew her name and respected her as a person. "She got sick at the end," Molly said sadly. "She couldn't work anymore. She stayed home, getting weaker and weaker. I remember when she stopped showing up," Daniel said. "I asked the supervisor, but he just said she had resigned for personal reasons. She didn't want anyone to know she was sick. She was afraid of being a bother." Daniel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his guilt. Margaret had worked for him for years, always faithful, always dedicated. And when she needed it most, when she was sick and taking care of a young granddaughter alone, he hadn't even bothered to find out what was happening. "She died alone in the hospital," Molly continued. "I wanted to stay with her, but they said kids weren't allowed. She sent me a message saying she loved me and that I was a very special girl. And after that, I was alone in the house. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know anyone to ask for help." Daniel looked at Molly, the granddaughter of the most dignified woman he had ever known, a child who had suffered so much because of his own negligence. "Molly," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry, so very sorry." "Why?" "Because I should have taken better care of your grandmother. I should have asked about her when she stopped working. I should have found out she was sick, that you were alone." "But you didn't know," Molly said simply. "I should have known. It was my responsibility to know." Ava listened to everything in silence, trying to understand the complexity of the situation. Her father knew Molly's grandmother. They had been connected for much longer than they had imagined. "Your grandmother talked about you a lot," Daniel continued. "She said you were her reason for living. That she worked so hard to give you a good life. And she did," Molly said, smiling through her tears. "She taught me to read, to write, to be polite. She told me beautiful stories. She made me feel loved. She loved you very much. And I loved her." Daniel looked at the photo in Molly's hands, Margaret Wilson, with her gentle smile and kind eyes. The woman who cleaned his office every night and who was single-handedly raising a granddaughter. The woman he had seen hundreds of times but never truly seen. "It's strange," he said, "how life works." "What do you mean?" "The granddaughter of the most dignified woman I ever knew is now here, in my house, being cared for by me." "Do you think my grandma made this happen?" Molly asked. Daniel looked at her, the same blue eyes as Margaret, the same quiet dignity, the same ability to find light even in darkness. "I think so," he answered honestly. "I think your grandmother is watching over you from heaven and sent you to find me. Maybe. Or maybe it's life's way of giving me a second chance." A second chance for what? Daniel hesitated. How could he explain to a child that he had been negligent, that he had failed to care for the people who depended on him? "Time to do the right things," he said finally. Molly smiled and handed him the photo. "Do you want to keep it tonight, to remember my grandma?" Daniel took the photo carefully, as if it were the most precious object in the world. "Thank you, Molly. I'll take good care of it." "I know you will." Ava finally spoke. "So Molly was always kind of part of our family, because of her grandma?" "In a way, yes," Daniel replied. "That's so cool. It's like it was destiny." Daniel looked again at Margaret's photo, then at Molly. It was as if life was giving back what he had once ignored. Margaret had worked for him for years, always invisible, always neglected. Now her granddaughter was here, needing the very care he had failed to give her grandmother. It was a second chance, an opportunity to make right what he had done wrong, to honor the memory of a good woman by caring for what she loved most in the world. "Molly," he said softly, "your grandmother would be very proud to see how brave and strong you are." "You think so? I'm sure of it." And in that moment, Daniel knew there were no more doubts. Molly wasn't just a child they had helped. She was part of a larger story, a connection that went back much further. It was as if Margaret was asking, through time and space, for him to take care of what she loved most. And he would. Forever. Daniel woke up in the dark, a few minutes before his alarm went off. It was Thursday morning, and Molly had been at the house for almost a week that had changed everything, not just the household routine, but something fundamental within him. The silence of the early morning enveloped him as he got up slowly. This was his morning routine, a few minutes alone in the kitchen, making coffee, organizing his thoughts for the day. But this time, something pulled him upstairs. He went up the stairs silently, as he did every morning to check if Ava was okay. But now there were 2 girls to look after. 2 daughters, he caught himself thinking, and the word didn't sound strange in his mind. Ava's bedroom door was ajar, as always. Daniel peeked through the crack and felt something deep stir in his chest. Ava and Molly were sleeping, wrapped in each other's arms in the same bed, their blonde hair spread across the pillow like rays of sunshine. Ava's arms protectively, instinctively enveloped Molly, an older sister looking after the younger one even in sleep. Molly had an expression of absolute peace on her face, something Daniel had never seen during that first week. It was the face of a child who finally felt safe, protected, loved. They breathed in the same rhythm, calm, trusting. 2 sisters who found each other in the most unexpected way, and who now couldn't imagine life without one another. Daniel stood there for several minutes, just watching, feeling something grow in his chest. It was more than affection, more than responsibility. It was pure and simple fatherly love. Molly was no longer the girl they had helped. She was his daughter, in everything but on paper. He went downstairs with that image etched in his memory. In the kitchen, he made coffee with automatic movements, but his mind was completely focused on what he had just seen. For a whole week, he had wondered what the next step was, what to do with Molly, what was best for her. But now, seeing the 2 girls sleeping in each other's arms, the answer seemed crystal clear. Molly wasn't being helped by them. She had become a part of them. She was no longer a child they were temporarily sheltering. She was his daughter, in everything but the paperwork. She already knew every corner of the house as if she had been born there. She knew where the plates were, which drawer had the silverware, which toothbrush was hers in the bathroom. She had her place at the breakfast table, her favorite side of the bed, her favorite doll among all of Ava's. She had her own clothes, no longer borrowed from her sister, but bought specifically for her by Daniel during the week. More importantly than all that, she had her permanent place in the family's heart. Daniel picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart, even though it was only 6 in the morning. "Dr. Richards, it's Daniel Stevens. Sorry to call so early, but I need to talk to you about something urgent." "Good morning, Daniel." The lawyer's voice sounded sleepy but attentive. "And what can I do for you?" "I want to adopt a child, a 5-year-old girl." There was a significant pause on the other end of the line. "Adoption? Daniel, that's a very serious, very complex decision. Have you already gone through the necessary procedures, social services, psychological evaluations, registration with the proper agencies?" "She's been with me for a week. It's a special situation." Daniel told the whole story in detail, how he found Molly rummaging through the trash, how she had come to his house, how she had adapted perfectly to the family, how he discovered she was Margaret Wilson's granddaughter. "I understand the situation," Dr. Richards said after listening carefully. "It is indeed special." "Well, there is a specific procedure for cases like this. First, we need to immediately regularize the child's situation with social services. Then, we start the adoption process itself." "How long does the whole process take?" "It depends on several factors: bureaucracy, evaluations, reports. Usually between 6 months and a year. But considering the child is already perfectly adapted to the home, that you have more than proven financial means and emotional stability, it could be significantly faster. What exactly do I need to do? Come to my office this morning, as early as possible. We'll file all the papers immediately. Every day counts in these processes. And is there any risk of her being taken from me during the process? Minimal. The fact that she is well cared for and clearly happy counts a lot in your favor. But we will make everything official quickly to avoid any problems. Daniel hung up the phone feeling a mix of anxiety and absolute determination. It was the right decision. He knew it with every fiber of his being. 3 hours later, he was sitting in the lawyer's office, signing a mountain of papers and answering detailed questions about his financial, emotional, and family situation. The process was complex, full of bureaucracy and legal requirements that seemed endless. "Is there any real possibility of a challenge?" he asked, worried. "Oh, well, theoretically any close relative of the child could claim custody, but from what you've told me in detail, she has absolutely no one. She really doesn't. Her maternal grandmother was the only family she knew, and she has passed away. There is no known father." "Then there shouldn't be any significant problems. I will need you to bring Molly here in a few days for a formal interview with a social worker. It's a mandatory standard procedure. Will she be scared by that? Not necessarily, if it's well explained in advance. It's important that she understands that you want to make official something that already exists perfectly in practice." "And after that interview?" "Psychological evaluation of everyone involved, a home inspection, technical reports, but nothing that should cause problems in your case." Daniel returned home with a folder full of documents and a heart heavy with responsibility, but also with hope. He was officially applying to be Molly's legal father. In a few months, if all went well, she would legally be his daughter. When he arrived, he found the two girls in the living room sitting on the floor drawing with total concentration. It was incredible how Molly had completely adapted to the house routine in just 1 week. She naturally woke up at the same time as Ava, had breakfast excitedly with the family, played while Daniel worked from his home office, and participated in all activities as if she had always been a part of them. "Hi, Daddy," Ava greeted him cheerfully without looking up from the drawing she was creating. "Hi, girls. What are you doing there?" "We're drawing our family," Ava replied with enthusiasm. "It's for a school project." Daniel came closer, curious to see better. On the paper, 4 stick figures were carefully drawn, holding hands in front of a colorful house. A tall man in a suit, 2 small blonde girls, and a taller female figure in a dress. "Who is this figure here?" Daniel asked gently, pointing to the 4th character. "That's Mommy," Ava replied with absolute naturalness. "My mommy who's in heaven watching over us and the new mom Molly will have when you get married again." Ava said, "Every complete family needs a mom," Molly explained, looking at Daniel seriously. So she drew both moms, the one that existed and the one that might exist. Daniel felt his eyes well up instantly. Ava had found a touching way to include both Maria's memory and the possibility of a different future for Molly. "It's a very beautiful and very smart drawing," he managed to say. "Can I put it on the fridge with the other one?" Molly asked hopefully. "Of course you can." As she went to the kitchen, Daniel sat on the floor next to Ava, amidst the scattered colored pencils. "Honey, can I talk to you about something very important?" "Of course, Daddy." "You always can," she replied, dropping the red pencil. "How would you feel if Molly became your real sister? Officially, legally?" Ava's eyes lit up like stars. "Like forever and ever, with papers and everything. Forever, with papers and everything. Are you going to officially adopt her?" Daniel was surprised by Ava's detailed knowledge of the subject. "How do you know so much about adoption?" "At school, there's a girl in my class who was adopted when she was a baby. She always tells everyone how cool it is to have a family that chose her specially. She says it's even more special than normal families." "And you would really like it if I adopted Molly?" "Very, very, very much," Ava practically shouted with excitement. "That way she'll never be alone in the whole world again, and I'll never be without a real sister again." "Are you absolutely sure? It would be a very big change for all of us, forever." "Daddy," Ava said with a seriousness that surprised Daniel. "She's already my sister in my heart. All that's missing is the official paper saying so to everyone." The simplicity and depth of Ava's answer touched Daniel more than any elaborate argument could. To her, Molly was already a complete part of the family. The rest was just bureaucratic formality. Molly came back from the kitchen and sat next to them on the rug, immediately sensing that something important was happening. "What were you guys talking about?" she asked with curiosity. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. It was time to have the most important conversation of his life. "Molly, do you know exactly what adoption is?" "I do. It's when a new family chooses a special child to be their daughter forever." "That's right. And how would you honestly feel if I wanted to adopt you?" Molly became completely still, like a statue. Her blue eyes widened enormously, and she looked from Daniel to Ava, then back to Daniel, processing the words. "Adopt me? For real?" "Yes. To make you officially, legally, my daughter and Ava's real sister." "But why would you do that?" "Because you're already part of our family, Molly. You already live here. You already have your special place at the table. You already sleep in the room with your sister. You're already part of all our conversations and games. The only thing missing is making it official on paper." "Does that mean I'll have a real dad?" The question came out in a whisper, filled with all the hope an orphaned child could carry in her heart. Daniel knelt in front of her and held her two small, warm hands in his. "That means you already do." Molly looked at him for a long moment that felt like an eternity, fully processing the words she had just heard. Then, large tears began to stream silently down her face. "Size, for real, really? For real, really? And I get to stay here forever until I'm all grown up? Forever, until you're grown up, and after that too? And I'll have the same last name as both of you. You will. Molly Stevens. And you'll be my real daddy, not just Ava's daddy who lets me stay here. I'll be your daddy just like I'm Ava's, with the same love." Molly threw herself into Daniel's arms, crying with pure joy. "I've always wanted a daddy," she sobbed against his chest. "I've dreamed about it every night." Daniel hugged her with all his might, feeling his own tears flow freely. "And I've always wanted two amazing daughters like you." Ava spontaneously joined the hug, creating a tight circle of love, happy tears, and promises of the future. "Now we're a real, complete family," she declared solemnly. They stayed like that for several long minutes, hugging, crying, laughing, dreaming of the future that awaited them. "How exactly is it going to work?" Molly asked when they finally calmed down. "Well, first we have to go talk to some very important people, social workers, psychologists, judges. They'll ask questions to make absolutely sure that we all want this from the bottom of our hearts. What if they say no?" "They won't say no," Daniel replied with total conviction. "Not when they see how perfectly you fit into this family." "How long does it all take?" "A few months of paperwork and interviews, but you'll stay here with us through the whole process. And after it's all done, then you'll get a brand new birth certificate with my last name. You'll officially be Molly Stevens." "Molly Stevens," she repeated slowly, smiling. "I really like that name." "And there will be a huge party," Ava added excitedly. "For a new family party. With chocolate cake?" Molly asked hopefully. "With the biggest chocolate cake in the world," Daniel promised solemnly. That night, during dinner, Daniel patiently explained to the girls what each step of the adoption process would be like. Ava asked millions of detailed questions, while Molly absorbed everything in respectful silence, still processing the magnitude of the change that was about to happen in her life. "Molly," Daniel said at bedtime, tucking both of them into bed, "are you absolutely sure you want this? Being adopted isn't something that can be easily undone later." "I'm totally sure," she answered without the slightest hesitation. "I've always wanted to belong to a real family." "You've always belonged here, since the first day you arrived, but now it will be official for everyone to know. Now it will be official." When the girls finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Daniel stayed in the room for a while, watching in the dark. In a few hours, he had made the most important decision of his life since marrying Maria. He was going to officially adopt Molly. He was going to legally make her his daughter. She was already part of the house. She was already part of his life. She was already part of the family in a way that went far beyond papers and legal documents. All that was left was the paperwork. And soon, very soon, even that would be settled for good. Daniel smiled in the dark, imagining the day Molly would receive her new birth certificate. The day she would officially become Molly Stevens. The day an orphan girl would finally have a real family to call her own. And a family that was incredibly lucky to have found the exact person who was missing to make it complete. The day had come. After 8 months of paperwork, interviews, visits from social services, and trips to the courthouse, it was finally the day of the final decision. Daniel woke up early, even before his alarm went off. Next to him in bed, Ava and Molly were sleeping soundly. Throughout the adoption process, the two of them had slept together in their father's bed whenever they got nervous or anxious, and this had been one of those nights. He watched the two girls in the morning silence. Molly was no longer the scared, hungry child they had found rummaging through trash. Her blonde hair shone healthily, her rosy skin was flushed, and most importantly, there was a constant light in her blue eyes, the light of someone who felt loved and protected. "Daddy?" Molly whispered, slowly opening her eyes. "Is it time yet?" "Not yet, sweetie. We still have a few hours." "I couldn't sleep well," she admitted. "Aunt, I was nervous. It's normal to be nervous. It's a very important day. What if something goes wrong?" Daniel sat up in bed and stroked her hair. "Nothing will go wrong, Molly. Nothing." Ava woke up, stretching. "Today's the day," she shouted, jumping out of bed. "Today Molly becomes a Stevens for real." 3 hours later, they were at the courthouse, waiting to be called. Molly wore her prettiest dress, light blue like her eyes, and held a folder with all the drawings she had made during the months of waiting. Daniel was in a formal suit, but inside his heart was racing. "The Stevens family," an employee called out. "That's us," Ava answered excitedly. In the judge's chambers, everything was simpler than Daniel had imagined. The judge, a man with grey hair and kind eyes, asked Molly a few final questions. "Are you sure you want to be adopted by Mr. Daniel Stevens?" "I am, Your Honor. And you understand that this means he will be your father forever?" "I understand. And I really want that." "Why?" "Because he takes care of me, protects me, tells me stories, and—" She hesitated, then continued in a firm voice, "and because I feel in my heart that he is my real father." The judge smiled. "Very well. I hereby declare the adoption officially finalized. Molly Wilson is now Molly Stevens." Ava shouted with joy. Daniel felt his eyes fill with tears. Molly stood still for a moment, as if she couldn't believe it. "Is it done?" she asked. "Am I a Stevens now?" "You're a Stevens now," the judge confirmed, handing her a new certificate. "Congratulations, Stevens family." On the way back home, Ava couldn't stop talking. "Now we're real sisters," she shouted. "Fired with the same last name and everything." Molly held the certificate as if it were made of gold, reading and rereading her new name, Molly Stevens. "Daddy," she said quietly. "Can I call you Daddy now?" "You always could, sweetie, but now it's official." "Daddy," she repeated, smiling. "My daddy." At home, Daniel had prepared a small surprise. In the living room, there was a simple chocolate cake with colorful candles and a banner that read, "Welcome to the family, Molly Stevens." "How beautiful," Molly exclaimed, clapping her hands. "Now you can make a new drawing," Ava suggested, "to celebrate." "Good idea, let's do it together." The two ran to get paper and colored pencils. Daniel watched them, smiling. It was incredible how they had become true sisters in every sense of the word. An hour later, they came back with a new drawing. "Look, Daddy." It was similar to the first drawing they had made together, but now there were 3 figures, a tall man in the middle, a girl on each side, all holding hands. Underneath, in careful letters, was written, "Now we are family." "Where should we put it?" Molly asked. "On the living room wall," Daniel suggested, "with the others." They went to the living room, where there was already a small gallery of the girls, drawings on the wall. The first drawing, "Best Friends Forever," was framed in the center. Around it, other drawings told the family's story. the house with 3 people, the castles they built together, the imaginary adventures. Daniel placed the new drawing next to the first one, creating a visual sequence of their journey. "It looks perfect," Ava said. "It's our story," Molly observed. "All drawn out." That night during dinner, Daniel gave a small speech. "I want you both to know that this is one of the most important days of my life, not just because the adoption was finalized, but because our family is officially complete." "Can I give a speech too?" Molly asked. "Of course." She stood up, serious and solemn. "I want to thank you for choosing me, for giving me a home, a sister, a daddy, for making me feel like I have a place in the world." Daniel felt his eyes well up again. "Thank you for choosing us too, Molly. And now," Ava added dramatically, "let's eat cake." The days that followed were about adjusting to the new reality. Molly practiced signing her new name, Molly Stevens. Ava introduced her to everyone as my real sister. Daniel took care of the final bureaucratic details of the adoption, but it was on a Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks later, that the moment Daniel would never forget happened. He was in the living room, reading some work documents, when he felt a presence beside him. Molly was there, just watching him. "What is it, sweetie? Can I sit with you?" "Of course." She settled on the sofa next to him, sitting quietly for a moment. Daniel noticed there was something different in her eyes, a deep emotion, as if she were gathering the courage to say something important. "Daddy," she began quietly. "Yes, love. You know." She hesitated, then continued with a voice full of emotion. "I've always wanted a dad." Daniel put down the papers and looked at her. "Always. Always. Since I was tiny. I would see other kids with their daddies, and I would imagine what it would be like to have one. What it would be like to have someone to protect me, to tell me stories, to make me feel safe. And how did you imagine it would be? I dreamed that my dad would be kind, that he would take care of me, that he would make me laugh, that he would teach me important things in life." Daniel felt something stir deep in his chest. "Tyson, now?" Molly moved closer and rested her head gently on his chest, like a little bird seeking shelter. "Now I have one." The words were simple, but so full of meaning that Daniel felt as if his heart would burst with emotion. He hugged her with all his might, feeling his own tears stream down. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for letting me be your dad. Thank you for wanting to be." They stayed like that for a long time, embraced on the living room sofa, father and daughter finally united not just by legal papers, but by a love that had grown naturally, day after day. When they finally separated, Daniel looked around the room. On the wall, the small gallery of drawings told their whole story. It started with "Best Friends Forever," moved through drawings of castles and adventures, and ended with "Now we are family." There was no luxury in those drawings, no exaggeration or sophistication. They were just childish scribbles made with cheap-colored pencils. But they told the most beautiful story Daniel knew, the story of how 3 lonely people had found each other and formed a family. "Daddy," Molly said, following his gaze, "do you think my grandma can see us from heaven?" "I think so." "Do you think she's happy?" Daniel thought of Margaret Wilson, the dignified woman who had raised Molly with so much love. He thought of how proud she would be to see her granddaughter now, loved, protected, part of a real family. "I think she's very happy," he replied, "and very proud of you. And of our family." "And of our family." Ava appeared in the room just then, coming back from playing in the garden. "What are you talking about?" "About our family," Molly answered. "Our family is the best in the world," Ava declared, throwing herself on the sofa between them. Daniel looked at the 2 girls, one on each side of him. Ava, his biological daughter, who had found in her adopted sister the companion she always wanted. Molly, his daughter of the heart, who had brought a new joy and a different perspective on what truly mattered in life into the house. "It is," he agreed, "the best in the world." That night, when he went to put the girls to bed, Daniel stopped once more at the bedroom door. Ava and Molly were talking quietly in bed, planning the next day's games. "Molly," Ava said, "do you remember when you were just my friend?" "I remember. It feels like a long time ago. Now you're my sister forever. Forever. Even when we get old." Even when we get old and have kids, and our kids will be cousins. They will, and we'll tell them how we met." Daniel smiled in the dark. The two were already planning the future, decades ahead, always including each other. Later, alone in the living room, he looked again at the drawings on the wall. It was a simple gallery, without expensive frames or sophisticated arrangements, but it told a story of pure love, of a family born from the heart, of how the best things in life don't cost money. The first drawing, two girls holding hands, had been the beginning of everything. The last three figures embracing was the perfect conclusion. Between them, all the other drawings showed the journey. Games, adventures, moments of discovery and growth. It was the visual documentation of how a friendship had turned into sisterly love, and how a lonely man had rediscovered the joy of being a father. Daniel took out his phone and took a picture of the entire wall. He wanted to save that moment, that story told in children's drawings, because there, in those simple scribbles, was the proof that the most beautiful families aren't born. They are built, day after day, drawing after drawing, hug after hug. No luxury, no exaggeration, just love. And love, Daniel had learned, was more than enough to build a perfect family. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.